Welcome back, and I hope you enjoyed the workshop and your Uber Eats lunch. We've talked today about how to include a more diverse and more relevant group of patients in drug development. And that includes Gen Z, which according to the Pew Research Center is now defined as anyone born between 1997 and 2012. 67 million Americans, about 1 in 5. Taylor Kane is a member of Gen Z, and she's a rare disease advocate. When she was a little girl, her dad died of a disease called ALD, and she learned she was a carrier. This inspired her. She founded and is now executive director of the international nonprofit Remember the Girls, which supports female carriers of rare X-linked disorders. Her focus today, how pharma and life sciences can engage Gen Z as future patients, customers, clinical trial participants, and employees. Taylor?
Hello, my name is Taylor Kane. I am a rare disease advocate, a patient engagement consultant, and the founder and executive director of an international nonprofit organization called Remember the Girls, which supports female carriers of rare X-linked disorders. I am 22 years old and a member of Generation Z, the generation following millennials, which includes those of us born between 1995 and 2010. If you don't know a lot about Gen Z and what matters to us, you definitely should. We already make up the largest percentage of the current population of the United States and represent 40% of consumer purchases. We are also your future patients, clinical trial participants, and employees. We are very different from the generations before us, with our own unique values and expectations when it comes to many things, including the pharmaceutical and healthcare industries. As a Gen Z patient advocate and consultant, I would like to share with you my thoughts on how you can effectively engage my generation and get us to embrace your company or brand and become your loyal advocates, supporters, and patients. First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself and how my rare disease advocacy journey began. When I was 3 years old, my dad was diagnosed with a rare genetic disease called adrenoleukodystrophy, or ALD for short. My family was told two very important things about ALD. The first, that ALD had no treatment or cure, and my dad would probably die in 2 or 3 years. And the second, that since ALD is caused by a mutation on the X chromosome, I was a genetic carrier of the disease and would have a 50% chance of passing it on to my future offspring. Very little was known about ALD carriers back then, and while my mom told me that I was a genetic carrier when I was around 8 or 9, that knowledge didn't become a focal point in my life until years later. My dad's condition continued to decline over the next 2.5 years. He was confined to a hospital bed in our dining room for most of that time, unable to walk, talk, swallow, or even recognize my little brother and I. He passed away shortly after I started kindergarten. My advocacy journey actually began only a few months later when my mom picked me up early from school and took me to speak about my family's experience with hospice care at a local United Way fundraising event. Of course, at this time, I had no idea that I was engaging in advocacy and would not even hear this term for the first time until over a decade later. I just liked being able to tell people about my dad and how grateful we were for the hospice nurses who had helped us during his illness and who had become part of our family. After this United Way event, I dove headfirst into advocacy, sharing my family's story not only to honor my dad's memory, but to raise awareness of and money for research for ALD. In addition to speaking at fundraisers and other events throughout elementary and middle school, I became extremely involved in petitioning the legislator of my home state of New Jersey to pass legislation requiring the screenings of newborns for ALD so that the disease could be caught early and there would be a chance for a cure, such as a stem cell transplant. After convincing the Senate president to introduce such a bill, testifying before the Senate Health Committee, and speaking very briefly to Governor Christie about the necessity for newborn screening, New Jersey ultimately became the third state to pass an ALD newborn screening law. In 10th grade, after visiting with a genetic counselor and learning more about my own status as a carrier of ALD, I started an online support group for other young ALD carriers, which I still run to this day. During college, and I went to the George Washington University in DC, I created and served as president of a club at my university for students impacted by rare disease called Rare GW, and also founded Remember the Girls, which has grown to over 800 members in just a few years. I believe that Remember the Girls has grown so quickly because I founded the organization when I was 18, and I simply did what came naturally to me by applying what I learned growing up on social media and the internet. And just last year, I published a memoir called Rare Like Us, in which I share the lessons I learned growing up in a family plagued by a rare genetic disease and the way I managed to come to terms with my loss through advocacy. Given my background, as you might imagine, I am a strong believer that no person is too young to be a powerful advocate and leader. Over the past few years, I've had the pleasure of advocating alongside so many other young change makers in the rare disease community. Age is not just a number, but a mobilizing force, especially when it comes to Generation Z. We Generation Z advocates and patients are particularly distinctive when compared to previous generations. We are the only generation to be born into the digital age. There was never a time that we didn't have access to the internet or mobile phones. We have grown up in a fully connected world, and we utilize technology and social media in a way that only we truly understand. As the oldest of us were just toddlers when 9/11 and Columbine occurred, we have also never known a time where we felt safe from terrorism or gun violence. Our formative years have been shaped by extreme political divisiveness, conspiracy theories, and fake news. Suffice it to say, our generation has some issues with trust and can be pretty skeptical about large corporations and big brands' claims that they are looking out for our best interests. This is also true when it comes to the pharmaceutical industry. In a recent survey conducted by the healthcare communications firm Pegasus, 46% of Gen Zs indicated that they believed that pharmaceutical companies were more interested in making money than in the well-being of patients who take their medications or use their products. According to the survey, however, 63% of Gen Zs admitted that they didn't understand exactly what pharmaceutical companies did. So there really is a great opportunity for the pharmaceutical and life science industries to educate youth about what they do and prove that they are trustworthy and authentic, that they have their patients' best interest in mind, and they are determined to make a positive contribution to the planet, things that are extremely important to Generation Z. We Gen Z patients are a very diverse group, and we want to be perceived and treated as individuals, as is in line with our interest in personalized medicine. We don't want to be seen as a number, and we certainly don't want to be deemed all alike. If you want us to embrace your company and brand or become your loyal patients and advocates, you have to understand what we want, what we need, what we care about, and how to connect with us. Your campaigns should be patient-focused and centered around engagement. We don't want to be lectured at or told what to think. We want to be listened to and understood. It's also extremely, extremely important that you develop solid relationships with our patient advocacy groups and the leaders of those groups. These groups are our communities, and the leaders, our influencers. The COVID-19 pandemic has shed even more light on the vitality of patient advocacy and involvement in industry. Now, the other thing Gen Zs look for in choosing or identifying with a company or brand is the company's overall contribution to humanity. I don't think baby boomers or any other generations fully appreciate how important this is to many of us Gen Zs. More than ever before, we are a generation of philanthropists and activists. 77% of us are interested in volunteer opportunities and careers with nonprofits. 76% are concerned about the environment. 60% want to have a career that makes a difference, and more than 10% want to start their own charity, if they haven't already. My generation cares deeply about the world we live in, and a company's impact on society really is a major influence on how we perceive them and in our decision to support them. While we Gen Zs are very individualistic and we have differing views when it comes to political ideologies, the vast majority of us are passionate about protecting the environment, about inclusivity, equality, and human rights. And we truly do care whether or not you are making a positive difference in the world, authentically, not just giving lip service to the idea. For example, many of my friends make an effort to shop at clothing stores that demonstrate a commitment to sustainability. So now that you know what we are looking for at a brand, a company that will treat us as individuals and really engage with us in our patient advocacy groups, while also demonstrating a commitment to making the world a better place, how do you get this message across? Social media, of course. Brochures or letters, not so good. We don't spend much time reading hard copies, and besides, they're not very good for the environment. While we do read emails, if it's something relevant to us, that's definitely not the best way to contact us. If you want us to care about what you're saying, you have to reach out to us in the places we are looking. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, Twitch. This list changes regularly as new platforms are developed. As I mentioned earlier, we are digital natives, the first generation that grew up with cell phones and social media and are the most technologically fluent. We want quick, immediate access to the content we are interested in, and it has been found that a majority of us often have 5 devices open at once: cell phones, TV, laptops, desktops, and tablets, and now we go back and forth between them all day long. As you've probably heard, our attention span is only 8 seconds. For that reason, we don't read ads or long, detailed explanations. To engage us, your content needs to be succinct, straightforward, and eye-catching. We prefer pictures and videos over the written word, and we aren't impressed by endorsements by celebrities. 63% of us say we are much more likely to give credence to the opinions of social media influencers than celebrities. Since Gen Zs are often involved in many different activities and extracurriculars, we need our healthcare to fit into our schedules. We want medical appointments and clinical trials that we can participate in virtually, at least to some extent, and we want to be asked and provide our input along the way. If your company wants not only to engage younger patients and advocates, but have them participate in your clinical trials, you need to meet them where they are. It's not just about having a professional presence on social media, but truly curating your content and strategies to appeal to our generation. As a patient leader myself, I pay very close attention to how companies in the life sciences industry make an effort to understand and work alongside other patient advocates, especially those in my generation. For example, last year, one pharma company made its annual theme the Year of the Young Adult and featured 12 articles written by young adult patient advocates on their website and social media accounts. Other companies make an effort to include young adult speakers at their events, webinars, panels, etc. They do, however, have to remember that young adult representatives shouldn't only consist of 30-plus somethings, but must include Generation Z as well. Another thing pharmaceutical and life science companies can and should do is help sponsor and uplift organizations' efforts which are dedicated to improving the quality of physical and mental health care for young adults. I'd like to conclude my possible talk with one final thought and a recommendation. First, the thought, and although it's just my opinion, I know a lot of people my age agree with it, and that's that only other Gen Zs can truly understand us. For example, I'm constantly having to re-explain the point of certain memes to some millennials and baby boomers in my life. While you may work with us, socialize with us, study us, no matter how close you are, you truly can't serve us without involving us in the conversation. As for the recommendation, it's vital you make a conscious effort to involve Gen Z patients in your advocacy, on your panels, and in your workplace or as consultants. This doesn't mean hiring a marketer who is social media savvy and claims to know about Gen Z, but really working with people from my generation to understand what we want and need from your companies. Thank you for listening.
A profound thank you, Taylor, for your energy and your activism. And if you would like to learn more, just go to rememberthegirls.org.